He was there during the Civil Rights era when Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. spoke to a Savannah church.
Savannah is one of the most desegregated cities in the Deep South.
Mr.
Wow,
President,
this is like old times.
how are you, sir?
Look, I'm
Good to see you. You doing
He
all
was
right?
there when a young Georgia representative said he was running for governor.
As far as politics is concerned, I wouldn't want to close the door.
And then president.
Yeah, he used to be a top interviewer, by the way.
Well, I'm not going to be bad today. Yeah.
He was there when Savannah's civil rights icon, W.W. Law, wanted his story told in depth.
W.W. Law would pull himself up by the bootstraps and lead his people.
Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The civil rights movement, that's what it was all about. To set this country right.
His WTOC special was honored with the Scripps Howard National Journalism Award.
Vice President News and anchor Doug Weathers.
Thank you very much.
Doug Weathers has been there,
For Project 11, this is Douglas Weathers, Channel 11 News.
broadcasting in Savannah starting in 1954, the same year WTOC became a television station. 2 weeks after it signed on air, Chief Engineer Kyle Goodman drove into a Savannah gas station and griped to an attendant that he couldn't find anyone who could splice film. That attendant was Doug Weathers. It just so happened that Doug had worked at a movie theater and he knew how to splice film. That day, one of Georgia's most prolific broadcasting careers began.
This is Douglas Weathers, Channel 11 News.
Once Doug started working at WTOC, he learned everything: camera, directing, writing, reporting, and when the news anchor didn't show up for the 6, Doug took the chair, and he stayed in that chair at WTOC until 1973, when the competitor, WJCL, lured him away with color cameras and a teleprompter.
Today marks Doug's last day on the air with Channel 22.
WTOC brought him back home to the Big Red 11 in 1979 as anchor and later vice president of news. And since the fall of 1980, Doug's newscast at 6 p.m. won every ratings book until his retirement in 2001.
He typically averaged a rating in the 60s and a share in the 70s, which is absolutely enormous, unthinkable. Our news consultant suggested that we do some research on individual anchors. And I'll never forget that first graph where all of the area news anchors, early and late, were all plotted on that graph, except Doug. His was missing. Kind of a mystery, until the news consultant reached around and flipped up a triangular piece of paper he'd taped to the back of the page. And there was Doug's rating all the way at the top. And they told us at that point in time that that was probably one of the highest ratings for audience perception and popularity in the country.
Thomas Jefferson identified something a couple hundred years ago he called the genius of the people. Doug proves that such a thing does exist. He's not the Harvard guy, but he's a man of integrity and substance and great personal warmth who's built one of the best news organizations in the state. And the people know that.
The loyalty to Doug isn't just contained to viewers. In his role as anchor and news director, Doug shaped the careers of many journalists who give credit to him for their professional success, as does Savannah native Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas.
I grew up watching you.
Oh, you did? Uh-oh.
And I just simply want to tell you that in our house, my grandfather always watched you on the news. And what you said was gospel, and the thing that I enjoy about that is the dignity with which you did your job. So just remember this, that you asked me how I'd like to be remembered. Well, just for one little kid growing up in Savannah, when you announced the news, it had an impact, and it had an impact on the person who's had the greatest impact on him.
Doug's impact on the Savannah television market goes well beyond broadcasting. Doug has always been a strong advocate for this community, volunteering his time whenever and wherever he could. Even now, at the age of 90 and a full 20 years past his retirement, Doug still generously gives his time, as he still sits on boards of nonprofit organizations and is actively involved in them. But Doug's greatest gift is his ability to make everyone he meets or sees, in person or on TV, feel important.
All right, so I'm out on this story, and this lady says to me, every night I watch WTOC, and one night she walks in the living room, and her husband's watching something else, and she says, what are you doing? And he said, for one night, couldn't you just watch something other than WTOC? And she said, no. And he said, why? And she said, because every night Doug Weather says good night to me, and some nights you don't.
And 20 years after you said good night to all of our viewers here at WTOC, every single week somebody asks me how you're doing. And I'm so happy to say you are great, and you still have more energy than most of us. Doug, on behalf of all of us here at WTOC, your family, we congratulate you on an honor so well deserved.